My name is Samuel Otieno. I'm 47 years old. I came to Minneapolis from Nairobi 19 years ago, first on a student visa that became a work visa that eventually became the kind of permanent life nobody plans for, but everyone ends up grateful for. I have a wife, a Cheng, who works the day shift at a pediatric clinic, and 2 children. My daughter is finishing her second year at the University of Minnesota studying biochemistry, and my son is 16 and currently more interested in basketball than anything I have to say about his homework. I clean office buildings at night. I have done this work for 11 years, the last 2 of them on the 19th floor of the Reardon Tower, a glass high-rise downtown that houses, among other things, the regional offices of Halbrook Greer Financial Partners, one of the larger wealth management firms in the Midwest. I work for a contracted janitorial company. I am not employed by Halbrook Greer. I'm employed by a company that is employed by the building's management company, which is itself a layer removed from the firm whose offices I clean. This matters because it is one of the reasons a man can work in the same space as the same people 5 nights a week for 2 years and remain almost entirely unknown to them. I start at 9 p.m. after the last of the analysts and associates have finally gone home, and I finish around 1 in the morning. I empty trash bins, I vacuum carpet that gets dirty in ways that always surprise people who have never thought about where dirt actually comes from. I wipe down conference tables that still have the ring marks of coffee cups from meetings that decided things I will never know the outcome of. I clean glass partitions until they're invisible, which is, I have often thought, an appropriately ironic kind of work for a man whose own presence in that building functions the same way. I am not bitter about this. I want to say that clearly, because this is not a story about resentment, though I understand if it sounds, at first, like it might become one. The corner office on the northwest side of the 19th floor belongs to Eleanor Voss. She became managing partner at 34, the youngest in the firm's history, and her office reflects exactly what you would expect. Clean lines, very little clutter, a single framed photograph of her parents on the credenza, and a window that looks out over the river and catches the last of the evening light before I arrive each night to clean it. In 2 years of cleaning that office, Eleanor Voss said a small number of things to me directly. "Excuse me," when she was working late and I came in to empty the bin. "Thank you." Once, maybe twice, said the way you thank an automated voice for confirming an appointment. "Could you make sure the windows get done? There was a smudge yesterday." Said to the air more than to me, on a night when I happened to still be in the room. She never asked my name. I had a name badge clipped to my uniform every single night. "Samuel," it said, in plain block letters, the same badge every cleaner in the building wears. I do not believe she ever read it. I do not say this with anger. I say it because it is true, and because I have come to understand over 11 years of this work that there is a particular kind of person whose attention simply does not extend to the hours after their own day ends. It isn't usually cruelty. It's closer to a kind of architecture of the mind. Certain people exist in your field of vision, and certain people exist in the room the way the furniture exists in the room. Useful and present and entirely unconsidered. I knew things about Eleanor Voss that she would have been surprised to learn I knew. I knew she kept a half-empty bottle of antacid tablets in her top desk drawer, which told me something about the kind of pressure she carried. I knew she worked later on Tuesdays and Thursdays, which I eventually understood corresponded to days when certain large accounts reported. I knew, because I am observant in the way that invisible men become observant, it is one of the only forms of agency available to you, that she had begun, over the past several months, working even later than usual, and that the framed photograph of her parents had been moved from the credenza to a spot directly in her line of sight from her desk chair. The kind of small adjustment people make when they need to look at something studying more often. I did not know why. It was not my business to know why. I simply noticed, the way I notice the things I notice, because noticing is most of what is left to a man who is otherwise unseen. The Tuesday night in question was the second week of February, bitterly cold even by Minnesota standards. The kind of night where the building's heating system worked audibly, a low groan through the vents that I had grown used to over the years. I arrived at 9, started my route on the south end of the floor as I always do, and was midway through the conference rooms when I heard something I had never heard in 2 years on that floor. I heard Eleanor Voss's voice, sharp with something that was not her usual controlled composure, coming from her office. Not on the phone. I would have recognized that rhythm. She was alone. and she was saying something low and urgent to herself. The particular tone of a person whose carefully built composure has just taken on water. I finished the room I was in, the way you do, because interrupting someone in distress without being asked is its own kind of intrusion. And I continued my route. When I reached the area near her office 20 minutes later, the door was open, and I could see her standing at her desk, both hands flat on the surface, staring at her monitor with an expression I had never seen on her face in 2 years. Something that looked unmistakably like fear. "Is everything all right, Miss Voss?" I asked. I want to be honest that I almost didn't ask. 2 years of being a piece of the architecture teaches you the shape of the boundary you're not supposed to cross. But something in her stillness made the question come out before I'd fully decided to ask it. She looked up at me the way you look up at a sound you weren't expecting, momentarily unplaced. She started and then stopped, because whatever was happening was apparently too large for the automatic reassurance most people offer strangers. "The building's network," she said finally, her voice tight. "It's been having intermittent outages for the past hour. I have a wire transfer confirmation that has to go out by 1 a.m. Tokyo time, which is," she glanced at her monitor, 40 minutes from now, and I cannot get the firm's VPN to hold a stable connection long enough to authorize it. IT support doesn't pick up after 8. The after-hours line goes to voicemail. If this doesn't process tonight, we lose a client relationship that took 18 months to build because of a server issue that has nothing to do with the actual transaction. I stood there for a moment. I understood, in that moment, that I was looking at the gap between what a person's title suggests about their power and what is actually true about their power at 1 in the morning when a piece of infrastructure fails, and the people paid to fix infrastructure have all gone home. "What kind of outage?" I asked. She looked at me properly for the first time. Not through me, not past me, but at me, with the particular surprise of someone realizing the question was specific enough to suggest the person asking might actually understand the answer. "Intermittent drops," she said. "The connection holds for 90 seconds, then drops for 2 or 3 minutes. I can't authenticate the transfer in that window." "Which floor's network closet are you on?" I asked. 19 shares a riser with 20 and 21, correct?" She blinked. I don't actually know." "I do," I said. "I clean the network closet on this floor every Tuesday. There's a switch in there that's been overheating intermittently for about 3 weeks. I've mentioned it twice to the building engineer on shift because the fan inside it has started making a grinding sound, the kind that usually means the bearing's going. If that switch is dropping under load, it would explain an intermittent connection that fails for a few minutes at a time and then recovers." She stared at me. I do not say this to make her seem foolish. I say it because the math of the moment was, I think, genuinely disorienting for her. The man whose name she had never learned was describing the precise mechanical failure happening 12 feet from her office, with more specificity than her own IT department had offered in an hour of silence. "Can you fix it?" she asked. "I can't repair a failing switch tonight," I said. "But I know where the building engineer keeps the spare equipment closet key, and there's a backup switch in there from the last upgrade cycle that was never decommissioned. If I'm right about what's failing, swapping it might stabilize your connection long enough to get your transfer through." "You know how to do that?" "I was an IT technician in Nairobi for 6 years before I came to the United States," I said. "My credentials didn't transfer the way I expected them to when I got here. This is not the work I trained for. But I still know how networking equipment fails, because some kinds of knowledge don't expire just because your job title changes." I watched something move across her face that I can only describe as the visible sound of an assumption breaking. We had 35 minutes. I retrieved the spare switch and the engineer's key, found the failing unit exactly where I expected it, warm to the touch, the fan inside grinding audibly the way I described, and swapped it for the backup, restoring the patch connections from memory because I had looked at that closet enough times over 3 weeks of noticing the noise to know roughly how it was configured. It took 11 minutes. I am not exaggerating the stakes when I say my hands were steadier than I expected them to be, given how long it had been since I'd done this kind of work under pressure. When I came back to her office, her connection had stabilized. She tested it twice, watched the transfer authentication process complete with 20 minutes to spare, and sat back in her chair with the specific exhale of someone who has just watched a structure that nearly collapsed quietly hold. "It worked," she said, looking at the screen, then at me. "It actually worked! The switch will need a permanent replacement," I said. "What I did is a temporary stabilization. You should tell the building engineer in the morning so it gets properly addressed before it fails again under load." She nodded slowly, still processing something larger than the technical fix. "Samuel," she said, "I want to tell you what that single word did after 2 years of silence around my name. It was not dramatic. She did not cry, and neither did I. But something settled in the room that had not been there before. The simple, overdue fact of being addressed as a specific person rather than a function." "Yes," I said, "that's your name. I've been reading it off your badge for 2 years, and I don't think I ever actually said it out loud to you." "No," I agreed. "You hadn't." She was quiet for a moment, looking at the screen that had just confirmed the transfer, then back at me. "I don't know what to say that doesn't sound inadequate. Given what just happened, you don't owe me a speech, Miss Voss," I said. "I was glad I could help. That's enough." "It isn't, though," she said, and there was something in her voice that told me she meant it as more than politeness. "I've walked past you for 2 years. I've said excuse me to you more times than I've asked you a single question about who you are. And tonight, the only reason my firm didn't lose an 18-month client relationship is because a man I never bothered to know happened to notice a sound in a closet that my own IT department couldn't be bothered to investigate." "You were busy," I said. "Running a firm like this takes a particular kind of attention. It doesn't always leave room for noticing the night shift." "That's a generous way to describe it." "It's an accurate way to describe it," I said. "I don't need it to be more complicated than that." She looked at me for a long moment. "What did you do in Nairobi?" "Before networking, I studied electrical engineering at the University of Nairobi," I said. "I worked for a telecommunications firm for 6 years. When I came here, the credentialing process to transfer that into an equivalent role would have taken years, and money I didn't have, with 2 children to support. So I found work that let me support my family while I figured out the rest. 11 years later, I am still figuring out the rest, the way most people are." She was quiet for a long time after that, looking at the photograph of her parents on the credenza, the one she'd moved into her direct line of sight. "My father built this firm from nothing," she said finally. "Started as a teller at a small regional bank. He used to tell me that the most dangerous thing a person in power can do is stop noticing the people who make the structure underneath them actually function. I think I forgot that somewhere in the last several years. I think I forgot it specifically and repeatedly with you." "You're noticing now," I said. "That feels like a very low bar to be praised for clearing." "It's not a low bar," I said. "Most people who fail to notice never notice that they failed to notice. You did. That's not nothing." She didn't argue with that. I finished my route that night the way I always do, methodically, floor by floor. And when I reached the elevator at 1 in the morning, she was standing near the bank of elevators with her coat on, which she had never once done in 2 years of late nights. "I wanted to say thank you properly," she said. "Not the kind I've been saying, the kind that means something." "You just did," I said. "I also want to talk to the building engineer about that switch first thing tomorrow. And I want to talk to my operations director about why our after-hours IT support has apparently been non-existent for longer than tonight." "That would be a good use of your morning," I agreed. She smiled, a small and slightly embarrassed thing, the kind of smile that comes from someone recalibrating in real time. "Good night, Samuel." "Good night, Miss Voss." I rode the elevator down alone, the way I do every night, and walked out into February cold that hit like a wall after the climate-controlled stillness of the tower. I drove home with the heater working too slowly, the way it always does in that truck, thinking about the particular shape of the evening. Not triumphant exactly, not the kind of story where the world rearranges itself dramatically around one good deed, just a name, said out loud, after 2 years of silence. Just a woman noticing, finally, the actual shape of the person who had been cleaning the glass around her life the entire time. I do not know if Eleanor Voss will remember my name in 6 months. I would like to think she will. I have learned, over 11 years of this work, not to build my sense of worth around whether people remember me, because that is a foundation that will eventually fail you. I built my worth a long time ago around something steadier. The fact that I show up, that I notice what other people miss, that I do the work in front of me with care, whether or not anyone is watching, because a Cheng is watching, and my children are watching, even when they don't say so. And that has always been enough of an audience for the life I am building. But I will say this. There is a particular kind of dignity in being good at something quietly, for years, with no expectation of recognition, and then having the moment arrive anyway, not because you sought it, but because the structure itself eventually reveals who actually understood how it worked all along. If you've ever felt unseen in a place where you showed up faithfully anyway, leave a comment below. I read everyone. And if you know someone who does the quiet work that makes everything else possible, the night shift, the cleanup, the unglamorous maintenance of things, tell them their name. It costs you nothing, and it might be the first time in years someone has. See you in the next one!